You see, one of the strangest, most disorienting moments in a person's life is the moment he begins to wake up, truly wake up. And I don't mean that in the sense of some grand spiritual fireworks. No, it's usually rather quiet, almost like realizing that the dream you were having was terribly convincing, and now the walls of that dream begin to melt away. It feels, at first, as if something is dying, and indeed it is. But it's not you that dies. What dies is the story you've been reciting about who you are, the one who must survive, must succeed, must make something of himself before the curtain falls. Awakening is death wearing the costume of discovery. It is the funeral of your imagined self and the birth of what was there all along. All our lives we've been taught to hold on to, cling to ideas, to our names, our reputations, our plans, our virtues and our vices. We think that by grasping tightly enough, we can prevent life from slipping through our fingers. But life, you see, is that very slipping. It's like trying to grab running water. The harder you clutch, the faster it escapes. So when awakening begins, it feels like betrayal. The old controls, the old narratives begin to crumble, and something in us cries, wait, I wasn't ready for this. And this is why awakening feels like dying. Because everything you ever used to define yourself, your memories, your ambitions, your carefully maintained personality, begins to unravel. You feel as if the floor has vanished beneath your feet, because the floor was never there. It was an agreement, a shared hallucination, a polite fiction we call the real world. But look closely, has anything truly been lost? When a wave subsides into the sea, it hasn't died. It has merely stopped pretending to be separate. The wave that says, I am me, and not the rest of the ocean, suffers endlessly trying to hold its shape. But when that shape dissolves, the sea laughs. So awakening is the sea, remembering it was never just the wave. It's life, remembering it was never merely your life. And the dying, the loss, is only the collapse of a misunderstanding. Still, this process is frightening, isn't it? Because we have built our entire security upon what's familiar. The idea of me is the last refuge we have. When that goes, what's left? You might think nothing. But that nothing is the astonishing discovery, for that nothing is not empty. It's pregnant, alive, radiant, with the same intelligence that turns acorns into oaks and stars into galaxies. We imagine awakening as an achievement, a crown placed upon the worthy. But in truth, it's a stripping away, a great unmasking. The world you thought you knew was painted upon a thin film of concepts, and now that film is cracking. It hurts. Oh, it hurts because the ego doesn't go quietly. It was built to survive. Yet the moment it surrenders, you see that nothing essential can die. You were never the actor, you were the stage upon which the actor appeared. You were never the wave struggling against the tide. You were the tide itself, forever rising and falling, never diminished. So when this unraveling begins, when the self you once defended starts to fade, don't panic. This is not punishment. This is grace, disguised as loss. It is life pulling off its mask and saying, behold, it was me all along. And perhaps, if you listen carefully, beneath the grief of letting go, you might hear laughter, soft, cosmic laughter, because the whole thing was a marvelous game. You thought you were a character, a separate somebody, but the universe was only pretending for the joy of pretending. So awakening, my friends, is the end of pretending. It's the discovery that what dies was never alive, and what lives was never born. And if that sounds like death, good. For only when the false dies can the real begin. Now, after the first unraveling comes another shock, the discovery that you were never truly steering this ship at all. The sense of being the doer, the controller, the master of destiny, this too begins to dissolve. And it's a tremendous blow to the ego, because control is the illusion upon which the whole performance of the separate self depends. All your life you've been told, take charge, make something of yourself, shape your future. And so you try, you plan, you worry, you wrestle the world into a shape that will fit your dreams. Sometimes you succeed, often you fail. But awakening comes as the rude realization that even the successes were not really yours. They were the dance of the universe moving through you, as natural as wind through the trees. You see, the idea of control is like drawing lines on the surface of water and expecting them to stay. We imagine we are pushing life forward, when in fact we are being carried by it as the leaf is carried by the stream. But the leaf has no complaints. It does not say, I must reach the ocean before sunset. It simply moves, spinning in sunlight and shadow, perfectly content with the ride. When this truth dawns, it feels first like a humiliation, because you look back at all your striving and realize it was never you doing it. You were like a hand puppet arguing with the hand. The mind wants to shout, then what's the point? If I'm not in control, what am I supposed to do? And the answer, the paradoxical, liberating answer, is nothing at all. Not the nothing of despair, but the nothing of clarity. For when the wind stops fighting itself, it can simply blow. When the ocean stops trying to control its waves, it becomes calm and deep. So, the loss of control is not a fall into chaos. It's the rediscovery of harmony. You begin to see that every heartbeat, every thought, every breath was never commanded, but happened. And if you pay attention, you'll notice that it's still happening beautifully, spontaneously, without a manager in sight. The ego, of course, resists. It says, surely I must do something to keep all this going. If I don't hold the wheel, the car will crash. But awakening whispers back, my dear, there was never a wheel. Life is not a vehicle driven by a driver. It's a current, a pulse, a rhythm, and you are that rhythm. To lose control is to realize that the dancer and the dance were never two. You are not standing on the sidelines of existence pushing it along. You are existence, moving of its own accord. And yet, ironically, once this is seen, a strange kind of effortless mastery arises. When the musician no longer struggles with the music, his hands play perfectly. When the mind ceases to interfere, action flows without hesitation. The so-called loss of control turns out to be the beginning of true participation. So don't be afraid of losing control. The river doesn't need your permission to reach the sea. You never were the current, you were always the whole river, pretending to be a traveler upon it. When this sinks in, you find an exquisite peace, because you realize that everything that has ever happened, your triumphs, your failures, your heartbreaks, were all waves in the same ocean of movement, rising and falling, guided by a wisdom deeper than thought. You can finally breathe. You can finally let go. And in that letting go, life begins to live itself through you with a grace and ease that no amount of effort could ever produce. And so, my friends, the loss of control is the beginning of trust. Trust in the intelligence of life itself. Once you surrender the steering wheel, you discover there was never any road to begin with, only the infinite dance of the present moment. After one has lost the illusion of control, another old comfort begins to slip away, the certainty of belief. Ah, belief, that invisible blanket we pull over ourselves on cold nights of uncertainty. For most of our lives, we cling to beliefs as if they were life rafts, political, moral, religious, even scientific. We say this is the truth, and we guard it fiercely, because to question it feels like falling into chaos. But when awakening deepens, those certainties begin to tremble. You see, that belief, by its very nature, is an attempt to hold reality still, to pin a butterfly with a needle. And reality will not be pinned. The moment you define it, it changes shape. Now, this doesn't mean that belief is evil or wrong. Belief is a useful map, a set of symbols to help us navigate. But the tragedy comes when we mistake the map for the territory. The word water cannot quench your thirst, and the word God cannot give you God. Sooner or later, you must drink directly. The awakening mind begins to see that every system, every doctrine, every philosophy, however noble, is only a finger pointing towards something unspeakable. And the danger, you see, is that we begin worshipping the finger. We argue about its shape, its direction, its color, and in doing so, we forget to look at the moon it was pointing to. So the certainty of belief begins to dissolve, and at first it feels dreadful because the ground you stood upon was never ground at all, but clouds beneath your feet. The ego panics. If I give up my beliefs, what will I stand on? How will I know what's right, what's real? What's me? But there is a marvelous secret here. When the mind releases its grip on fixed ideas, what appears is not chaos but clarity. For belief clings, but faith, true faith, lets go. To live without rigid belief is not to drift in confusion. It is to float in wonder. It's like opening your eyes underwater and realizing that all along the current was carrying you. You don't need to believe in the current for it to move you. It moves by its own nature. Watts would say, the opposite of belief isn't disbelief, it's awareness. When you are truly aware, you no longer need to believe or disbelieve anything, you see. Belief is a substitute for sight. When you are blind, you believe what others tell you. When your eyes open, you don't need to believe in the sun. You simply bask in its light. This is why all great mystics across traditions end in silence. They begin with words, with sacred texts and rituals, but sooner or later, they fall quiet, not because they've found nothing to say, but because they've found something that words cannot say. So losing belief is the beginning of genuine seeing, and it's frightening, yes, because the mind loves boundaries, loves to know where it stands. But the heart, the heart loves the open sea. When belief falls away, the world becomes alive again, not frozen in categories, not split into right and wrong, sinner and saint, but shimmering, dancing, every leaf, every star, every breath, vibrating with the same mystery. And then you understand what Watts meant when he said that the real faith is not clinging to the known, but surrendering to the unknown. To believe is to hold, to awaken is to open. You begin to see that life doesn't need your belief to exist. The tree grows, the rain falls, the sun burns without creed or scripture. Reality does not require your approval. So when belief dies, what is born is wonder. And in that wonder, there is no need for defense, no argument, no dogma, only the quiet astonishment of being. And that, my friends, is what it means to lose belief and gain faith, to trade certainty for curiosity and fear for freedom. Now, once the certainties of belief begin to fade, another illusion quietly follows it out the door, the grandest illusion of them all, the drama of identity. You see, each of us has been cast in a role since birth. Someone handed us a script before we could even read. We were told, you are so-and-so from such and such a family with these duties, these talents, these flaws, and being obedient actors, we did our best to play the part convincingly. We learned how to smile when expected, how to frown on cue. We collected lines from parents, teachers, religions, and television, and we practiced them until we forgot they were lines. We began to think that the role was who we were. And then, one day, something strange happens. The mask begins to slip. You feel a quiet dissonance, the sense that you are not quite the person you appear to be. You try to fix it, to adjust the mask, to play the role better, but something deeper in you whispers, wait, who is acting here? That whisper is the beginning of awakening. For the moment you ask, who am I? Really? The whole play starts to wobble. Now, losing identity can feel like losing your mind, and in a way, it is, because the mind loves its characters. It wants to be someone important, the successful one, the kind one, the spiritual one, the misunderstood one. It doesn't matter what costume you choose, as long as there's a costume. But awakening reveals that there was never truly an actor separate from the play. The character and the stage are made of the same stuff. The self is nothing more than a pattern in the flow, a wave on the sea of consciousness, pretending to be a creature apart from the ocean that gives it shape. Watts would grin and say, "You are the universe, playing hide and seek with itself. It hides behind the mask called you. And then, when the time is right, it peeks out and says, ah, there I was all along." When you lose the drama of identity, the great seriousness of life begins to crumble. You see the game for what it is, not a tragedy, not even a moral contest, but a magnificent performance. And when you know you're acting, you can finally enjoy the play. This doesn't mean you stop playing roles. You still have a name, a job, a personality. You may be a teacher, a parent, an artist, but now you wear these roles lightly, like clothes that you can take off at the end of the day. You are no longer trapped inside them. The ego says, if I am not this person, I'm nothing. And awakening replies, exactly. But that nothing is not a void, it's freedom. Because once you stop clinging to a single identity, you can be anything. You can laugh at yourself, contradict yourself, start anew. Life becomes a dance rather than a defense. And isn't it strange? The very thing we fear the loss of self turns out to be the thing we've been longing for all along. To stop pretending, to breathe, to exist without explanation. When you see through the drama, you no longer struggle to prove yourself. You realize that the flower doesn't justify its color, the star doesn't argue for its brightness. They simply are. And you, too, simply are. It's a tremendous relief to drop the mask, even for a moment. You find that life doesn't collapse without it. The show goes on, only now you're aware that it's a show, and that awareness changes everything. The laughter that comes after this realization is not cynical, but joyful. You laugh because you were fooled, and you laugh even more because it was such a beautiful trick. The actor thought he was real, and the universe played along. And so, my friends, when you lose the drama of identity, you don't vanish, you expand. You become the stage upon which all identities rise and fall. You can play any part, love any role, and still remain untouched, because you've remembered that the play was never separate from the player. The self, the I, the name, all of it was a costume borrowed for a time. And when the performance ends, you bow, you smile, and you step into the wings of eternity. Not defeated, but free. After the masks of identity have fallen away, the next illusion to slip through your fingers is the approval of the crowd. And oh, how we love that approval. We spend the first half of our lives trying to earn it. Parents, teachers, peers, society, each one a mirror in which we check our reflection. Am I doing well? Do they like me? Do they see me? It's astonishing how much energy we devote to being seen. But once you begin to wake up, you discover a subtle shift. You can no longer act purely to please others, because you now know that others are part of the same dream you are leaving behind. You can no longer sell your soul for applause, because you've caught sight of who the buyer really is. Another actor in the same play, bowing to the same imaginary script. The approval of the crowd is intoxicating precisely because it's hollow. It's like echoing your own voice in a canyon and mistaking the echo for company. It feels warm for a moment, then fades. And the silence that follows asks you a difficult question. If no one is watching, who are you now? When awakening takes hold, the crowd begins to feel far away. Their games, their values, their seriousness, it all starts to look like children fighting over toys. And this doesn't mean you become cold or arrogant. It simply means you can no longer pretend the game is ultimate. You cannot lie to yourself so convincingly anymore. Friends may drift away. Family might not understand. They'll say, "You've changed." And indeed you have, because the old you lived for their approval, while the new you simply lives. Watts once said that when you awaken, you no longer take the rules of the game seriously, but you can still play it beautifully. That's the difference. The worldly man plays to win. The awakened one plays for the sheer joy of movement. So yes, when you lose the crowd's approval, it hurts. It's lonely at first, because our sense of belonging was built upon conformity. But soon you see that real belonging never came from agreement, it came from awareness. The crowd gives you a sense of comfort, but at the cost of your authenticity. When you let go of that, the loneliness you feel is not emptiness, it's the spaciousness of freedom. For the first time, you can breathe your own air. You stop performing. You speak truth even when it trembles. You walk your own rhythm, even when no drum is beating for you. And in doing so, you find a deeper companionship, not with the crowd, but with life itself. And as often happens in this strange dance, once you stop craving approval, people begin to feel strangely drawn to you, because authenticity has its own quiet gravity. Those who are ready recognize it without words. You see, losing approval is how you learn to stand alone. And standing alone is how you learn that you were never alone at all. For behind the shifting tides of human opinion lies the vast ocean of being the same consciousness that animates every face you meet. So let the crowd cheer or boo. The wave rises, the wave falls, the sea remains undisturbed. You don't need to convince the sea that you exist. You are the sea. And then, after all this letting go, after control, belief, identity, and approval have quietly slipped through your hands, there comes another curious loss, one that often frightens seekers more than any other. You begin to lose your motivation. You wake up in the morning, and that old engine inside, the one fueled by ambition and anxiety, no longer starts. The voice that used to shout, "Go, achieve, improve," falls silent. You find yourself sitting in the stillness, watching the sunlight on the wall, wondering, what now? At first, it feels like failure. After all, we've been trained from childhood to move forward, to set goals, to climb ladders, to chase after purpose as if life itself were a race. The world teaches us that stillness is laziness, that contentment is dangerous. So when motivation fades, we panic. Am I losing myself? Have I become indifferent? But no, my friends, you are not losing yourself. You are losing the illusion that you ever needed to chase yourself. The old motivation came from lack, from the subtle feeling that something was missing, that you were incomplete, that happiness lay just a little further ahead. Every goal was another horizon, another mirage. You ran because you believed the running would save you, but awakening reveals something astonishing. There is no finish line. There never was. The moment you stop running, you realize you've been home the whole time. When the false self dissolves, there's no one left to improve. And so the machinery of striving grinds to a halt, not because life has lost meaning, but because it no longer needs one. Life is meaning. It doesn't move towards something. It unfolds like music, note by note, perfectly complete at every instant. Watts often said, "We don't listen to music to get to the end of it. You don't hear a symphony and rush for the final chord. You listen because the whole thing is the point." And that's precisely what happens when you lose motivation. You stop trying to reach the end of the song and start listening again. Now, this doesn't mean you sit in a cave doing nothing. Rather, action becomes spontaneous, playful, effortless. You still build, create, help, love, but not because you must or because you hope to gain something. You do it because the doing itself is delightful. In this way, the old carrot and stick morality disappears. You're no longer pushed by fear of failure or pulled by promise of reward. You act as a dancer, acts moving simply because it's joyous to move. This is why enlightened beings seem so calm, so unhurried. They haven't stopped living. They've stopped struggling. Their actions arise like laughter, unplanned, sincere, and without purpose beyond the moment itself. You may find that you no longer care for grand ambitions, yet you care deeply for small, ordinary things. Making tea, watching clouds, talking to a friend. There's a quiet fulfillment in simply being, without having to justify that being. And as this understanding ripens, you begin to see that losing motivation is not a symptom of apathy, but the first breath of freedom. For what greater freedom is there than to act without compulsion, to live without demand, to love without reason? The ego sought progress. The soul seeks participation. One was driven, the other dances. So, if you find yourself unmotivated, uncertain, uninterested in the old games, take heart. It means the wind has changed direction. You are no longer being carried by fear or desire. You've entered the wide, open sky where everything happens naturally. And once you taste that, you'll see that life does not need a motive to move. It is movement itself. Like a river, it flows not to reach the ocean, but because flowing is its nature. You too are that river. And now, at last, you are flowing freely. By now, as the old structures continue to dissolve, you begin to lose something even more subtle and more fundamental than control, belief, or identity. You lose the comforting sense of certainty. You lose the illusion of time. For most of your life, you've lived in a straight line, past behind you, future ahead. You've measured progress in hours, success in years, meaning in destinations. You've said to yourself, "One day, I'll arrive." But awakening steals away that line. It bends it until the ends meet, and suddenly you find yourself standing in a circle, in this eternal now. At first, this loss of time is disorienting. You feel suspended, like a traveler who's missed his train. The plans that used to give your life shape the what next, the someday, lose their meaning. And the mind, poor thing, begins to panic. Because the mind needs future, the way a fire needs oxygen. Without it, the flame sputters. You'll notice it when you try to make plans. Something in you hesitates. You can still write them down, but they feel lighter, less binding. You sense that life is already complete, that tomorrow will take care of itself, and that what's unfolding now is everything there is. Watts used to say, "Eternity isn't endless time, it's the absence of time." And when you fall into that absence, it feels at first like falling into nothing. But slowly you realize this nothing is full, shimmering, alive. It is the fullness that time could only hint at. You see, the comfort of certainty was always a mirage. We thought we knew who we were, where we were going, what the world was. But that certainty was like mist pretending to be marble. And when it vanishes, you feel naked, and free. This is the paradox. You lose your sense of where you stand, yet for the first time you stand firmly on reality itself. Because what's real doesn't need to be mapped or measured. It simply is. And so, the mind's game begins to crumble. It says, if there is no future, how will I become better? How will I get anywhere? And awakening whispers back, you don't need to become, you already are. You never left the place you sought. Time, you see, was the greatest trick of all the magician's illusion that made you believe the present was a narrow bridge between what has been and what will be. But the present is not a bridge, it's an ocean. It stretches endlessly in every direction. Once you taste this, the rush to escape the moment evaporates. You stop living for weekends, for promotions, for enlightenment, for tomorrow's sunrise. You realize that this sunrise, the one happening right now, has never ended. And certainty? It too fades, and in its place comes a quiet trust. You begin to feel that not knowing is far more peaceful than pretending to know. The mind's job was to keep you safe by building fences of logic around mystery. But mystery was never dangerous. It was love in disguise. Losing certainty means you no longer need the universe to make sense because you can finally feel it instead of explaining it. You can walk through uncertainty as a fish swims through water, effortlessly, belonging to it. And when you let go of time, something beautiful happens. You begin to see the sacredness in the ordinary. Because if now is all there is, then every act, however small, is infinite. Making tea, brushing your hair, watching the wind move through trees, all become lit from within, as if the universe were playing through you. And for once you were listening. This is not resignation, it's revelation. You haven't lost the world. You've lost your illusion about the world. The ticking of clocks still goes on. But you hear it differently, not as a reminder of time running out, but as the heartbeat of eternity itself. And so, my friends, as time dissolves, life becomes timeless. The race ends, but the dance begins. The future melts into presence. And you realize that the only thing you've ever needed to trust was this simple, ungraspable, ever-changing moment that has always been home. There comes a point, my friends, after the illusions have fallen, one by one, control, belief, identity, time, when the world itself seems to fade. It's what the mystics have long called the dark night of the soul. And it is not poetic exaggeration. It is as real as the winter before spring. You find yourself in a strange in-between. The old world with its meanings, its comforts, its purposes has died. But the new world has not yet appeared. You are standing in the ashes of your own becoming, not yet sure what has survived the fire. This is the hour when silence grows thick, and even the simplest things lose their color. You look around and wonder, what happened to me? Where did everyone go? Where did I go? The truth is, everything familiar was tied to the dream that has ended. The people you knew, the ambitions you carried, the emotions you trusted, they were all built upon the foundation of that old I. And when the I begins to dissolve, everything it touched dissolves with it. It feels like loss. And it is loss, the loss of illusion, the loss of borrowed meaning. You can no longer pretend that what once sustained you still does. The songs that once filled your heart now sound far away. Even spiritual teachings feel hollow. The words are still beautiful, but the soul can't taste them. Watts once compared it to walking through a fog after enlightenment, as if you've awakened from one dream only to find yourself in another, subtler one. You've seen through the play, but you don't yet know how to live without it. And so the mind begins to ask desperate questions. Have I gone too far? Did I make a mistake? You long for the old certainty, even the old suffering, because at least it was known. The darkness feels endless, and the temptation to turn back is strong. But listen closely, for this darkness is not punishment. It is incubation. It is the chrysalis between caterpillar and butterfly. The very discomfort you feel is the cracking of the old shell. The dark night, you see, is not a step backward. It's the silence before a new song. It is the moment when all the scaffolding collapses so that truth can finally stand on its own. Watts said, "To remain in the known is to remain dead." So the dark night, bleak as it seems, is actually life's great mercy, stripping you of everything that keeps you half alive. There is a peculiar grace in this despair. You learn to stop grasping for meaning, to stop demanding that life justify itself. You sit quietly in the emptiness, and slowly, very slowly, you realize that the emptiness is not hostile. It's vast, spacious, alive. It's the womb of everything yet to come. In this stillness, you begin to see that you are not the one lost in the dark, you are the dark. You are the still space in which loss and fear appear. The one who suffers is fading, but the awareness of that fading, that quiet witnessing, remains untouched. And there, in that witnessing, something miraculous begins. It's faint at first, like the first hint of dawn. You feel a softness where resistance used to be. You start to sense that even this darkness has purpose, that it is shaping you into something you cannot yet imagine. The saints and mystics were right. Before you can see the light, you must go through the night. But the light does not appear after the darkness. It appears as the darkness begins to dissolve. You see, the dark night is not the end of the path, it is the passage. It is the death of every false thing you thought was you. And when that death is complete, you awaken to what cannot die. So when everything familiar has gone, and you sit in silence not knowing what you are, do not despair. You are closer to truth than you have ever been. The dawn is already on its way, but it will not come to you, it will come through you. For the light you are waiting for has been shining all along. Only the shadow of self made it seem far away. And when the night finally lifts, you will see that you never left the light, you simply forgot to look inward. And then, at last, after that long night of unknowing, something extraordinary begins to happen. Though it's so simple, you might almost miss it. The darkness doesn't end with a trumpet blast or a blinding flash of revelation. It ends like winter, ends quietly, unnoticed. As the frost gives way to a single flower, you begin to sense that nothing was truly taken from you. What seemed like loss was only the shedding of layers that were never yours to begin with. Control, belief, identity, approval, time, all those were borrowed clothes. And now, standing naked before existence, you realize that nothing essential was ever stripped away. Watts once said, "You are not a stranger here. You belong as much as the stars and the waves." That realization is the dawn. You discover that the one who was struggling to awaken was never separate from what it sought. The great trade, you see, is not between life and death, or between illusion and truth. It is between fear and trust. You give up fear, and in return, you receive everything. What you've been calling loss all along was simply space being made for what cannot be lost. The mind can lose, the body can lose, the personality can lose, but awareness itself cannot. It has never been diminished by anything that has happened. The whole storm of life has been passing through it like clouds through the sky, leaving the sky untouched. And when you see that, a deep peace settles in. You stop trying to hold the clouds in place. You stop trying to paint the sky blue. You realize that everything you fought to keep was transient, and everything you feared to lose was never real. It's a marvelous joke. Really, life had to trick you into letting go. If it had told you from the start that you were already free, you would never have believed it. So it invented a game. It let you wander, search, despair, die 1,000 small deaths until finally, exhausted, you gave up the chase. And in that surrender, you discovered what was always there. What you find now is not some grand cosmic secret. It's the utter simplicity of being, the quiet recognition that this breath, This moment, this awareness is enough. It always was. It's the moment when the wave stops pretending to be apart from the sea and feels the ocean move through it. The moment when the dancer realizes there is no dance separate from himself. And so the trade turns out to be the greatest bargain imaginable. You lose what was never yours and gain what can never be taken. You trade a name for a vastness, a story for silence, a small self for the entire sky. When this realization ripens, gratitude floods in, not for anything in particular, but for the sheer miracle that this is. You look around and everything is luminous. You can't explain why. The world hasn't changed. But you have. Or rather, the one who was demanding that the world make sense has fallen silent. And in that silence, life becomes infinitely generous. You don't have to chase happiness anymore. You start to notice it everywhere. In a cup of tea, in the sound of rain, in a stranger's laugh, in the soft ache of memory. Even sorrow glows now, because you see it too is made of light. This is what it means to find what can never be lost, to see that there is no longer anything to defend, no argument to win, no future to reach. There is only the eternal play of forms, all arising and dissolving in what you are. Watts would often pause here, chuckle, and say, "You see, the point of the dance is not to arrive at the end of the floor. The point is the dancing itself. And now, for the first time, you are dancing without trying to lead. Everything you once clung to has gone, and yet you are fuller than ever before. Because the emptiness you feared turns out to be the fullness of existence itself. And so you sit quietly, smiling perhaps, realizing that you never really lost a thing. You only traded shadows for sunlight, dreams for waking, and fear for the freedom of being exactly what you are, boundless, timeless, whole. When all this has passed, when the false has fallen away, and the truth has quietly taken its place, you find yourself standing in a very ordinary world. The same streets, the same people, the same sky. Nothing has changed, and yet everything is new. It's as though you've attended your own funeral and walked out alive. The self you mourn so deeply, the doer, the believer, the actor, the seeker, has been laid to rest. And now you move through life not as the one who must survive, but as the one who is simply here. At first, it's strange. You catch yourself smiling at the most mundane things, the way sunlight lands on dust, the rhythm of footsteps on a wet pavement, the smell of bread. You're astonished by how vivid it all is, how quietly miraculous. You want to tell everyone, but you quickly realize you can't. Not because it's secret, but because it's obvious. So obvious that no one notices. Watts once said that awakening is like laughing at a joke you've been told your whole life but only just now understood. The punchline is, there was never anyone separate to awaken. Life was playing all the roles. And now, the play goes on, only the seriousness is gone. You still go to work, you still cook dinner, you still forget things, lose your keys, pay taxes, but you're no longer doing these things to become something. You're doing them because they are part of the dance. Before, life felt like a ladder. Now it feels like music. Every note perfect, even the dissonant ones. You stop thinking of days as obstacles to cross and start hearing them as melodies unfolding on their own. You find that compassion comes naturally, not because you've decided to be good, but because you no longer see a boundary between yourself and others. Their joys and sorrows ripple through you like waves through water. Helping them feels as natural as breathing. And you notice that laughter comes more easily. You laugh at your own seriousness, at the cosmic absurdity of ever trying to control what was always free. You laugh because you finally see the humor in it all, the divine comedy of the universe pretending to be human. But this laughter is not mockery. It's love. You laugh as a child laughs when the magician reveals the trick. The awe doesn't disappear. It deepens. Now, living after the funeral doesn't mean retreating from the world. It means returning to it. Lighter, transparent, unburdened. You still play your roles, friend, lover, parent, teacher, but now they are expressions of joy, not masks of fear. You find that life keeps asking for your participation, not your control, just your attention. When you eat, you really eat. When you listen, you truly listen. When you walk without destination. Everything is immediate, present, and unrepeatable. And this is what makes it sacred. Not the incense, not the chants, not the robes, but the simple act of being here, awake to the ordinary miracle of existence. It's like returning home after a long journey only to realize you never left. You were dreaming of distance, of struggle, of return. And now that the dream has dissolved, you sit by the fire of the present moment, and it feels enough. Watts often said, having died before you die, you can finally live. And this is it. You have died to the fiction of being a separate self, and in doing so, you've been reborn as everything. So life goes on beautifully, absurdly, mysteriously, and you move with it, knowing now that there's nowhere to get to, nothing to defend, and no one to become. The play continues, but you know it's a play. And that makes all the difference. You bow to it, to all of it, the laughter, the pain, the uncertainty, the endless change, and you whisper with a smile, ah, yes, I see now. For this is the dance of return, the return to simplicity, to wonder, to the freedom of just being. It is not the end of the journey, but the rediscovery that there never was one, only life, forever unfolding, forever enough. You see, after all that shedding, all that dying into life, something beautiful dawns. It isn't dramatic, it's subtle, like a smile that appears on your face before you even know why. You realize it was all worth it. Every loss, every confusion, every lonely night, all of it was part of the most magnificent exchange imaginable, because what you gave up was never real, and what you gained was everything that ever was. You lost illusions and received infinity. You lost stories and gained silence. You lost yourself and found that you were the whole show. There's a kind of cosmic humor in it. You spent years climbing the mountain, only to find the summit was where you started, and the view has been here all along. And you laugh not the laughter of mockery, but of relief. You laugh because the game was never meant to be won. It was meant to be played. Watts would often say, the meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. But we are always scurrying about, desperate to make sense of it, missing the simple fact that it doesn't need to make sense to be perfect. When you see this, an eternal smile blooms within you. It isn't forced or even chosen. It's the smile of the universe looking out through your eyes. It's what happens when the great joke of existence lands. The joke that you were never really separate, never really in danger, never really lacking. You begin to see that the very things you once feared, change, loss, death, were the instruments through which life was revealing its music. The notes of tragedy and joy blend into a single melody. And in that melody, there's no more need to seek or strive. You simply are, and that is enough. And so, the smile stays. It doesn't depend on circumstance, or weather, or fortune. It's not the grin of the naive, but the calm curve of someone who finally understands that everything, even the mistakes, even the suffering, was part of the perfection. When you've made the great trade, you can lose again and again without fear, because you now know you never truly lose. You may shed forms, but not being. You may bury dreams, but not awareness. What you are is untouched by gain or loss. This smile, this quiet joy, is what the sages call liberation. Not fireworks, not visions, not angels descending, but the simple realization that you have always been free, that the whole universe is a dance with no dancer, a song with no singer, a smile with no face, and yet it is all faces. You see, enlightenment isn't about escaping life, it's about seeing that you are life. And when that is seen, the game continues exactly as before. Only now, it's suffused with laughter. You eat, you work, you love, you weep, but behind it all hums that subtle joy, that quiet knowing. The world goes on spinning, but you no longer chase it. You dance with it. And perhaps at the very end, when your body grows tired and the curtain of time draws close, you'll remember again that nothing real can be lost. You'll smile one last time, the same smile you were born with, the same one you've always had, and life will smile back. Because, my friends, that's the secret. The trade was never between you and the universe. It was the universe trading with itself, pretending to forget, just to rediscover and to smile. And so, we come to the end, or perhaps the beginning, for endings and beginnings are the same circle, seen from different points. There is really nothing left to explain. The words have carried you as far as they can, and now they must fall away, like a raft abandoned once you reach the shore. Because truth, you see, cannot be said, it can only be heard in the spaces between words. It lives not in what I've told you, but in the quiet that follows. If you listen closely, you might hear it now, that gentle hum behind everything. The murmur of life breathing through all forms, even through the stillness. It is the same hum that was there before you were born, and it will remain long after your name has vanished. This is the soundless music of being. The heartbeat of the cosmos playing through you, through me, through all that is. And in realizing that, you have returned not to an idea or a belief, but to this unadorned moment, the taste of air, the weight of your body, the awareness of hearing. This is the sacred ordinary that was hiding behind all the mysticism and all the searching. Do not rush from here. There is nowhere to go. The future is already included in the present, and the past is nothing more than the echo of now. If you understand this not with the mind, but with the marrow of your being, then you will see that awakening is not something you achieve. It is what you are when you stop trying to be anything else. Silence becomes your teacher then. You stop wrestling with life and begin listening to it. The river of thought still flows, but you no longer fall in. You sit on its bank and smile as it passes. And as the ripples fade, something vast and still remains the awareness that was there before any of this began. The watcher behind every dream. The eye of eternity looking at itself. It is enough to rest here, to breathe, to let the great mystery unfold without asking it to reveal its plans. In the end, you see, all teachings dissolve into this one understanding, that you and the universe are not two, that what you sought was never missing, that this eternal, ineffable now is home. And perhaps in this silence, you might feel the faintest smile rise within you, not yours alone, but the smile of existence itself shining through your eyes. And so, let us leave it here in silence, in laughter, in the boundless presence of what cannot be named. For the truest words ever spoken are the ones never said.